All right, we are live. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for leaving all of those wonderful comments for Yvonne. And welcome to the launch of Yvonne Blomer's new book, The Last Show on Earth. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And yeah, if you want to let us know where you're joining us from in the chat, that could be fun to read out. So my name is Malika, and I am the Marketing and Promotions Coordinator here at Caitlin Press. A little bit about Caitlin Press. So we are an independent Canadian publisher located in Qualicum Beach on Vancouver Island. We publish culturally significant books, including fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. Caitlin Press is also the home of Dagger Editions, an imprint for the voices of queer women identifying writers. Before we get started, I would like to say thank you and acknowledge the support that Caitlin Press receives from the Government of Canada and the British Columbia Arts Council through the Canada Book Fund as a small independent publisher. I would also like to give a very big thanks to Munro's Books in Victoria. And you can purchase copies of The Last Show on Earth directly from Munro's Books. You can order online if you're not in Victoria, and they will ship the book to you. And of course, if you're in Victoria, you can go in person to buy books. Yvonne has signed copies, and there are still a few signed copies left. So I highly encourage you to order them while they're still there. If you click on the little green button at the bottom of the screen that says buy the book, it will take you directly to Munro's, and you'll be able to order the book online while we're doing the launch here. So I encourage you to press that button. I would also like to recognize that this event, although virtual, does take place on the land of Indigenous peoples. Caitlin Press is located in Qualicum Beach on the traditional territories of the Qualicum First Nation. Munro's Books is in Victoria on the traditional unceded territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt people. Munro's has partnered with the Support Network for Indigenous Women and Women of Color, a Victoria-based nonprofit organization that offers education, safe spaces, free programs, and events to help women take greater control of their lives. When you buy books at Munro's, you can actually choose to donate to the Support Network for Indigenous Women and Women of Color. Some final housekeeping while people continue to trickle in. The audience, video, and microphone are not active, and we are recording, and it will be available on YouTube after the event. For the chat, all users can see the chat. However, the chat is not recorded to YouTube. If you would like to hide the chat and you're on a desktop computer, you can just put your mouse in the upper right-hand corner of the chat and a little down arrow will pop up. So you just click that arrow and it will hide the chat. We also encourage you to ask questions throughout the event because we will have a Q&A period at the end. To ask a question, you can just click the Ask a Question button that's down below on your on the screen. Or you can ask in the chat and we'll try and answer them. But because we have a lot of lovely messages, if you put a question in the chat, we might miss it. So it's just easiest if you can drop it in the Ask a Question button. If someone asks a question that you also want answered, just click the button beside the question to vote for it. All right. And now that the housekeeping is done, I'm pleased to introduce Yvonne Blomer, Ariel Gordon, and John Borton. So tonight's host, Ariel Gordon, is a Winnipeg Treaty 1 territory-based writer, editor, and enthusiast. Her most recent books are Treed, Walking in Canada's Urban Forests, a collection of essays that combine science writing and the personal essay, and Tree Talk, a public poetry project where Ariel hangs poems in trees and asks passerby to add their thoughts, ideas, and secrets. She is also the ringleader of Writers of Spring, a National Poetry Month project with the Winnipeg International Writers Festival that appears in the Winnipeg Free Press. So I'm going to bring Ariel on the screen here. Just a second. All right, now I'm going to introduce John Borton. So John Borton is a poet, essayist, editor, and writing mentor. His books include Polari for the Boy with the Eyes of the Virgin Selected Poems, Seminal, the Anthology of Canada's Gay Male Poets, We Are Not Avatars, Essays, Memoirs, Manifestos, and The Essential Douglas Lepan, which won a 2020 E-Lit Award. Lost Family, his 12th collection of poetry, was nominated for the 2021 Derek Walcott Prize. Recipient of 3 Archibald Lampman Awards, a CBC Literary Award, and a National Magazine Award, he served as writer-in-residence for the University of New Brunswick, Saskatoon Public Library, and Memorial University. Formerly the co-editor of Arc Poetry Magazine and the editor of the Malahat Review, he was born in Edmonton, me too, in 1957, raised in Calgary, and now lives in Victoria, where he is the 5th Poet Laureate. So I will bring John onto the screen. All right, okay, and we have some clapping from Ariel. All right, John, bear with me as I use my mouse. Okay, and finally, the person we are all here for, Yvonne Blomer. So award-winning poet and memoirist Yvonne Blomer is the author of the travel memoir Sugar Ride, Cycling from Hanoi to Kuala Lumpur, and 3 books of poetry. She works as an editor, teacher, and mentor in poetry and memoir. Yvonne served as the City of Victoria Poet Laureate from 2015 to 2018. In 2017, Yvonne edited the, I'm just gonna give some feedback, sorry about that. Okay, in 2017, Yvonne edited the anthology Refugium, Poems for the Pacific, and in 2020, Sweetwater, Poems for the Watershed, both with Caitlin Press. Her anthology, Hologram for PK Page, which she co-edited, is forthcoming from Caitlin Press, and of course, her latest book, The Last Show on Earth, is what we are all celebrating tonight. So I will get off your screens now and let our honored guests take it away. So first, Yvonne, let's bring her up.
Hey. Ooh. Lovely. It's like whale noises.
It is. It's better than my peacock meow.
I love your peacock meow. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I love the chat so far.
Let me just, I'm gonna see where it's coming from.
Is that the world or the universe asking you to read your whale poem? I hope you're listening. Okay, so yeah, to return to what I was saying before the echoing business, I'm so pleased to be here. I am so honored. I know Yvonne has a really wide and varied community, you know, and I bet you so many of you are like, she's my best writer friend. You know, she's my best colleague. She's my best friend. She's the person I turn to when I'm sad or happy or anything in between. I bet you a lot of you have read her books or been to her readings or been one of her students. And I just want to say that Yvonne has a pretty wide wingspan. And if she was a bird, she would be a blue-footed booby. You know, have you ever been to one of those museums where they have the string with the wingspan of a bird and you can find out which bird you are? I think that's a valuable, that is the context for that comment. But yeah, so I guess what I want to say is keep up with the love in the chat. It's what makes us feel like we're not just shouting into the void. It's what makes these online spaces feel like an event. Like you're standing in the back of the room and gossiping. Or you're sitting there and you hear her read and you go, oh, you know, you make that noise that people make at poetry readings. And so I'd like to tell you to do that. I'd like to tell you to put some insightful questions down in the Ask a Question, just because otherwise you'll be relying on my questions and John's questions, although John's questions I'm sure will be very good. But otherwise you'll be listening to me ask questions that come out of my brain. So in the Ask a Question, that's where you would put your questions. Beyond that, yeah, I'm so looking forward to hearing both of these readings. Like many of you, I've been dipping in and out of Yvonne's book over the last few days, and it's great. I'm like astonished, even though I'm astonished to meet her there. I'm astonished and happy, and yeah, and I hope all of you are too. So, okay, John, you're going to read for us first. And John comes to us in a variety of roles. He was Yvonne's editor, so he edited the poems in this book. He is her successor as Victoria's Poet Laureate. And I can't think of another way that he, and he's just like a fellow wonderful member of the community in Victoria. So I guess I would like to invite John up to the stage. And, one second. Rob Taylor says that he thinks that Yvonne is a trumpeter swan. Does anybody else want to hazard a guess as to which wingspan Yvonne might have?
I was just going to say that means friend, Ariel.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my camera and my mic, and John is going to come up to the stage. So please give John a warm chat round of applause.
That's the sound of me surfacing. That was me surfacing. So okay, well, first of all, I'd just like to congratulate Yvonne. Well, it does really feel like 20 leagues under the sea, 20,000 leagues under the sea. Sorry, I'm just a little bit taken aback by the echoing. So,
looks like we're having some technical difficulties, but Ariel, did you want to maybe ask Yvonne some questions, or maybe Yvonne could do some readings while John takes a look at the audio, and then John, I'll just email you in the background here.
Yeah. Yvonne? Do you mind coming up, Yvonne Blomer?
Here I am. I'm up.
Yeah.
And I've got my speaker on. Hi.
Okay. Hi. So what do you want to do? Do you want a question? Do you want to be pinpricked with a question, or do you want to read a poem? You could read the opening salvo to the book, which I know
I'm
you were
going to read the opening poem.
Oh, and hold up the book.
Oh, yes, I will. Hang on. Okay, here's the book. Can I just say, so maybe I'll do some thank yous too.
Yeah,
so
that's
good. The book cover was designed by Rhonda Gantz. Thank you, Rhonda Gantz. I do believe she had her booster today, so she may not be able to attend. So thank you to Rhonda. Thank you to John. Read, everyone's saying. Okay, I'm going to read. This is not really the title poem, but it's the poem in which the title appears. And one of the last things I did as Poet Laureate was I had the opportunity to select paintings by Robert Bateman and create a beautiful show in the gallery here of poems and art. And so the opening poem is one of those poems. And it's after Robert Bateman's painting, Circus Train Nighthawks. And the poem is called Circus Moon, Circus Train. Candy wrapper moon, split-winged hawks, circus train. A dragon, silver and gold scaled, its lashing tail. How tent and train drew coin from candy-flossed hands, teased in by popcorn's buttery scent. This beast once chuntered across borders. Now the moon an opening in night, where blue, gray puce seep in. Here and then gone, a shadow, a species moving on a field you see and look for again. Faithful swaying servant, rolling, articulated, it carried animals and humans. Mover of low moans and quick laughter. Every rail and tie a rehearsal for the last show on earth. Waning moon, night-stilled hawk, broken-spined serpent. The oiled skin and painted smiles of ballerina, clown, strongman shine through, ghost shapes in splintered shafts. Light on this reptilian ride. Absence of whistle on a field where a kid stands. Frayed jeans, eyes rolled to sky as puffed breath moves on wind. Luminous, empty moon. Feral moon. Night's coming, coming in. So there it is. And the last show on earth comes from the 1950 something movie, The Greatest Show on Earth. And so my dad made me watch that when I was a kid. And it was one of his favorite movies. And it was great, really great. And a complex movie. I highly recommend it. So there you go.
So what made this poem for you the opening piece, like the piece that sort of launched this book?
I think when I started putting the poems together, I really wanted that painting for the cover, truth be told. And once I imagined that painting for the cover, the whole book sort of started to come into shape for me more clearly. And I asked Robert Bateman if I could have it, and they had a very serious family discussion about it. But it's owned by a family member who didn't really want it on a book, which I totally appreciate and totally get. And I think the cover is fantastic. But it was a great process to go from the art to the poem, and then the poem to the book through the art was very kind of fantastic.
It's almost like a reverse ekphrasis, right?
Yeah.
Like creating a cover to go with a poem that was created based on a piece of art.
Right. And the cover then contains elements, I think, that are suggested in the poems throughout as well. Yeah.
I mean, a cover is always an agonizing process.
Yeah, but I feel like, so it's a dog, but it's very wolf-like. And then you can see there's 3 humans here walking away from the dog or walking towards. That's, and I feel like my family is a family of 3, and only one child doesn't guarantee the future of your genetic material. So I like that suggestion in a book that's looking at climate change and that stuff.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to read another one? Could you read another one for us?
I could, yes. Maybe I will read something random.
Oh, Rob Taylor's doing my job again. He's just posted a link to the
He's so good. I was thinking, I think I could share the screen. But
Rob Taylor, I'm going to fight you later.
Oh, yeah. And I'm supposed to say the page number, and I forgot. But I saw that Ariel was on it. Like,
I'm doing my best here.
oh my God. You're so good. Well, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the 4 sections of the book. So the book is divided into 4 sections. Querencia, which is a Spanish word meaning kind of the place where your strength is drawn from, or like it's also to a bull in the ring, the place where it stands for the best defense area, which I kind of like as well, right? Because I'm the person who likes to have my back to the room in a restaurant. So it's like that kind of feeling. The second section is called Horology, which is kind of the study of time. And then Backward We Traveled is the third. And then The Last Show on Earth is the last section. And I'm going to read poems from all of those sections. So maybe I'll do that.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
So some of these poems were chapbooks. Some of them were poems you wrote as the poet laureate. Some were, there's a bunch of the poems in this were from a bunch of different sources. Like, was this, like, did this feel like a themed collection from the beginning? Or did you sort of assemble things and then, or pull everything that you had from this, like, 5 or 6 year, period, and then sort of make something? Like, I'm curious about the process.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these poems were poems I wrote for projects as poet laureate. And that makes sense that they would feel like a collection because I applied to the position of poet laureate with this idea of doing something to draw attention to the ocean. And so every poem I read at any event relating to the city had the ocean or a reminder of the ocean in it. So those poems would fit together. And then the Robert Bateman poems, not all of them are in here, but the ones most focused on the environment. And I also had a chapbook with Leaf Press that was focused on the environment. So those poems go together really nicely, I think. Mm-hmm. And then in the meantime, during all that writing that one does for things when one is a poet laureate, I was raising a son with special needs. My parents-in-law passed away. My mom passed away. So those poems are woven in as well and feel very much a part of what humans are living through now is the diverse needs of each other and all of that kind of thing. So, yeah.
All right, read us another poem.
Sonnet for a Newborn, now 7. And the newborn is now actually 15. Underground we were, below the citadel, my son newborn asleep on my chest. On the streets above, Italian flowed like mother's milk in heat. We were in a cathedral or under it. We felt the etched walls for markings, birds or other animals. The monks or a priest above began to sing. Was it Ave Maria? That fell through stone, through the ages and knowledge of stone. Sound, thrum in the chest entered us. Out of the corner of my eye or my imagination, I saw a boy leaning in. He was my son now. His hands are small, perfect, though one pinky finger a little crooked. Chords he plays while standing there. He flicks his fingers, idle or bored, flicks, and when he's lost interest, he flicks again. Taps nail to nail, he picks a low baritone song, gratia plena. And so my son was born with a rare genetic disorder and then a little later in life was diagnosed with autism spectrum. So the newborn doesn't know that he has autism, but the 7-year-old does, which I find kind of fascinating in that play of time in a poem. I will keep going until somebody tells me to stop. I'm next going to read Magpie Shrike, which is on page 36. And I was going to run little polls as you guys listened. So the first poll would be Magpie Shrike versus Spotted Owl. So I don't know how to set that up, but maybe Ariel does. Magpie Shrike. And I thought I would just say, I'm trying to, I think, capture my own colonial and settler history in this poem, which is set in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. Magpie Shrike. Head in the shade, I am on my back in my mother's Rhodesian garden. Coeat, coeat, the wind, footsteps on red-packed road. I am dirt along my spine. Confusion in the cedar branches of another country. Wind scent of earth and jacarandas. Shrike, sharp clawed and bawling. I am small and easily burn. In my mother's garden, the grass is never green. In black and white photographs, her dress stark white. On a tricycle, perch makes bird of my spine, hollow-boned migrant. I am small. No one to let the sun out. All day it yokes the house. This, the strong one, strike in the bush, at the garden's periphery, and lunch, one sun-impaled reptile. I am dirt and burn. Fat in a ceramic basin, wild, black-eyed shrike. I am two. I am wanting. Cedar, skin, magpie, wind. And while we're in...
I was just going to say that was so nice.
Thank you. I'm going to read a poem called Bulawayo, which is a city in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. My mom and her family moved there when she was quite young, and she ran races in school. Bulawayo, after Natalie Shapiro's Pennsylvania. Once a mother, before she was a runner, the long red roads of her private flight. I misunderstood the cost. I thought it was love that erases what we are, and love a currencia. Call mother, the woman a medal in her hand, her coarse coat and dimpled smile. Tomorrow vanishes the smile on her face. I yelp to run the whole length of my one life back to her. Of course, death comes. Then the fuzzy bewilderment of dreams. Always this act of endurance, but a hand strokes my clammy forehead. People newly born with her pith, born obstinate. Okay, I'm curious how John is doing as I move into the second section.
I feel like if we haven't, we'll just keep going. And
So do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. How do you want to proceed now?
I think you should read now for a bit, and then I'll read some more. Does that sound good to you?
Fine.
Okay.
That's what you want.
You're very clear now. That's great.
Right. Okay. Well, I apologize for any confusion.
No worries.
So first of all, thank you for including me in this launch, Yvonne, and congratulations. I'm probably some ways, if not the first reader of the book, maybe the second, having edited the book. And as we worked together, the clarity of the work just became sharper and sharper. So the poems I've chosen to read echo on many of the themes, or some of the themes, in Yvonne's book, and her concerns as a writer. And so I thought I'm going to read 6 sonnets, a couple of which are new since my own book came out. My last book, Lost Family, is a book of about 150 sonnets. So I thought I would begin with one that didn't end up being in the book, but is in Yvonne's anthology, Refugium. And the sonnet is called Alexander Mackenzie Reaches the Pacific, near Bella Coola, July 22nd, 1793. The beaches bore no driftwood. The old growth fell in storms, was felled for totems. No cut logs sprung loose from booms, drivers, later butt downstream. Salmon hatchling sped by the flow from discreet river mouths to flit through silt from high inland this side of a divide the land could never feel, the split belied by fresh water parting north and west. Guilt, nothing he thought of, looking for a route to China. The first Englander to cross a margin, we've breached deeper since with lost bearings in good conscience. He'd not dispute, not knowing how far they'd shift as he plied through salt the flights of salmon thousands wide. And a poem from Lost Family. And I live very close to the ocean in Victoria, and there is a breakwater near where I live, which I walk almost daily. And so actually 2 or 3 of these sonnets are inspired by the breakwater. And this one is called Last of the Catchers. And why I called it that is that people are always fishing along the breakwater, and it seemed that I never saw anyone catch anything. Last of the Catchers. I've never caught sight of what they catch. Boys static as old men less awkward than boys, patient as herons, as lizards, wrists flicked quick as tongues, flies pierced and deployed. The lines cast far and teased. What cold voids the hooks slip through, flat and clear as quartz, or rough, catchers swamped as waves rear, the lines cast far and teased, neither sculpin nor octopi striking on bait. Stone blocks stood on descending stairs, numb to the logic they ballast below. Insistent tides as the cormorants shriek, torpedo through reflected sky to spear vanished prey, shrugging off the undertow. And this is one of the more recent sonnets, and it was commissioned by Maclean's magazine, of all things, for an issue they were doing on last year on sort of the year-end forecast for 2022, which I think no one could have forecast at all based on what's happened thus far. And this poem's called Long Range Forecast. Walking into what lies ahead through fog along the breakwater, I sense its bent granite finger blindly beckon. Joggers as they breeze past, light-footed, confident as I am not. The beacon at the end too faint, with its bloodshot eye, to cut through what may roll in next. The low-hanging stench of burnt inland trees, sudden heat, hail spewed by atmospheric rivers, drought, snowmelt, while at last urging higher the levels of freighted seas. Yet somehow I have built in the stillborn haze of such upheaval a day-to-day, years-long walking practice, the boots I resole, worn thin by witness. And the next poem is a sonnet from Lost Family, and it refers to a particular part of Beacon Hill Park, which is about 3 blocks from where I live, or 4 blocks. And if you know the park, there's the lookout, and the slope below was formerly a place where Indigenous peoples, the Lekwungen people, would sun. And the title of the poem is the Lekwungen word for that slope, which is Mikan. Mikan. Sheltered behind a screen of wind-ravaged arbutus, their roots picked out in camas and fawn lilies outrun by narcissus, I've scaled the slope they rise above, burnished by salt lifting from the sea, those who first lay against it to sky gaze, unrehearsed in views the next to come had transplanted, a tipped savanna of traits, cloudy slant imposed on what's lasted as knowable but private about earth, our scavenging, aloof, idiolect eroding range, anyone this climb rakes susceptible to what the land's inclined to speak, this hill warmed by the sun, my face heat washed as till. And so of course Mikan means warmed by the sun. And this is I always think of it as the concluding sonnet for Lost Family, but actually there's another kind of a coda to the book of 7 sonnets, but I always think of this as the last one. And again, it's about the neighborhood in which I live. And it begins with a quote from W.H. Auden, which is, "Life remains a blessing, although you cannot bless." 3 amazing things I saw on Thursday. While I was out walking late one evening toward the Salish Sea beneath dusk-stained chestnuts, the lantern's budding flame sustained by rain-rinsed air, the calm, unplumbed meaning behind the peacock's crazed sitar's sharp cries unscored, I stopped to watch a freshly horned stag twist blossoms off bent low and forlorn boughs of cherry. His soft lips grimaced wide. The tide laid flat on the bias as blue, milky linen to the shore where I next stood. Waves rucked against the dimness stars shed. A single dangling thread of mist slipped through a gap in the Souk Hills until the last of tangential day was, by crispness, spread. And this is the last sonnet I'm going to read. And it's a relatively new one. And it's also about the breakwater. And I walked out on it one evening, well, actually late at night, on a very clear evening. And as I went farther out onto the breakwater, the stars above became sharper and sharper. Orion, wind sailing. The breakwater parts the water, midnight cleaved as I walk its angled, moonlit span from end to end. My own end without plan, so turned away from. Each overlooked slight, resounding wave behind wave against rough blocks of granite stacked from the ocean floor. A breached whale lifting me above the surf to slide me from hump to fin, vertebra by vertebra when it dives, a tailwind flipping me skywards, makeshift belt picked out in stars, clouds pinioning my legs and arms to the void, eyes wide, sword hilted, unbound existence caught in place by the whale's spout to soar, the planet spinning, floating calm. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Yvonne, for asking me to read with her, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you, John. That was wonderful. All the oceans, and I can see where you are, of course, throughout all those poems, and just wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Maybe I will just, I don't know. Yeah, I'll start until you disappear. I wasn't going to read this poem, but I'm going to. This will eventually be my poet laureate legacy poem, so I thought I would read it. Our one blue bowl. Praise this broken world, the blue within it. The water, orca, salmon, seaweed, and wrack. The crow and gull, the chip bag and butt, the boat debris. Praise the girl for fast dip in, the boy for skipped stone. Praise beer cans, corks, broken buoys, and rope made from hemp. Praise fisher folk and world trade for tankers, tugs, and smoke. This tidal, arched, foaming blue bowl, this salted, sculpted, cracked blue bowl. Savor what's moored by rope and net and hunger. Tied by hunger, heat, and death. We taste this grief, our marbled blue world. So I will carry on. It was nice to read for a bit and then have John, though I'm sorry John had to struggle with tech issues. I'm in the second section, and it's called Horology, or the study of time. And the poem I'm going to read is the title poem for this section, called Horology. And it's an interesting poem because it's the longest ago started poem. I've been working on it for a long time, but the image in it is set in Japan. And Rupert, who is the you in the poem, my husband, and I lived in Japan a fair number, more than 20 years ago. So I think this incident that happened in Japan stayed with me until this poem. And page 63. At the train station in Nogata, you wait. Another train approaches, but I am not on it. Hours. The shorthand moves and you wait. Years. You will watch your mother. The pneumonia in her chest in that room where time holds. Here, men with coins for sake. Women, their kimono pace. Pneumatic, the train's approach. It is the cliche of every arrival and departure platform. But where am I? Is there a loss approaching? Your mother's borrowed night clothes, your fingers at the hairline. I am on the train now, my knee tracking its meters. None of us know how close the end, but again, the clock sound of a train. We didn't have the cell phones we have now back then also, because, that would have totally killed the idea of the poem if we could have just texted each other. Okay, so here is Spotted Owl as Desire, and this poem also inspired by Robert Maitman's painting Mossy Branches, Spotted Owl. True owl, old growth owl, nocturnal owl, the clock turns by you. Barking owl, whistling, hooted notes fall from mossed trees. Old man moss, night's plume moss, creeping feather moss. Nothing human here except me. Your eyes a lure. Shoulder hunched owl, padded in your brown mottled cloak. What are you tracking? Fogged in owl, muffle feathered owl. Patience is your domain. Bone lichen feathered, lure browed. Old Strix, what are you making me into? I often think or wonder what animals are thinking of humans, and I think possibly they just think we're awfully noisy. Moving into the third section, backward we travel. I note that I am not very consistently good at telling you the page number, and I apologize for that. This poem is a ghazal, and a kind of nearly formal ghazal in that it has the repeated word and right before kind of rhyme, and the repeated word is masks. And it's the poem started for me, I was getting an iron infusion and there was news on, which I rarely have on at home. And it was the officer on trial for the murder of George Floyd. And I just very clearly remember his masked face and his eyes staring at the camera. Shifting symbols under the big top. Fiesta del Redentore, the end of a plague. Canal regatta, floating bridge, lanterns, crowds in staged masks. Of a bat or a spider, sugared skeleton face, children like circus characters in their Vogue masks. In a matchbox, in a bedside table, softly shaped black leather, a Spanish pendant, an aged mask. Theatrical, evocative, carnival and no plays. In the shops, a queen, jack of hearts, a bird-beaked phage mask. On the streets, fist raised in a courtroom, only his eyes as he's charged his rage mask. We are all masked, this plague on our breath. Once play, once theater. Now we are caged by masks. Which I support, just in case you wondered. I'm going to read, so the book is full of people as well as poems. The poems, a lot of the poems are inspired by poets I've been reading or dedicated to friends or inspired by art or photography. And the next two poems are inspired from reading different poets. And the two poems I'm reading and the two poets are both originally from Odessa, which is part of the Ukraine. And I think what's going on suddenly is horrific. And I'm a believer in speaking to what's happening in the world. But these poems more speak to my connection to the poets. So, what are they serving along the river Neris? Reading Ilya Kaminsky. And the river Neris is in Lithuania. Pear or rain-soaked river rock, serving love, hands in lap, serving qualms, small silver eggs. What say you to the rain, to the river of morning, thread of night, serving music, a note in a twine of song, serving drought, war, soil not for growing, serving pebbles of grief. In the tea house, honey rosehip, nonsense served with fried bread, wheat beer, locks on a lover's bridge. What are the teenage girls serving? Puberty widens hips, despite everything watered down. All evening they cut tomatoes, torn, bruised, overripe, serve the men's soft hands. Locks, keys in the river, rain-soaked children, hunger, night-sucked stones. And the second I'm going to read of this kind of poem is called Washing Dishes, reading Anna Akhmatova, and I have a line in the poem is hers. Sometimes, and I dedicate this to Liz, my student who is here tonight from Connecticut, because she's one of the Jewish people who shows up in the poem. So, Washing Dishes, reading Anna Akhmatova. Sometimes, hands in warm water, I am Eastern European. Sometimes Jewish, eating potatoes and warm borscht with friends from New York. Their accents, I want them in my mouth, shaping my palate and the taste of what I see on the street. Have you considered a quiet revolution or a hunger strike? I often ponder water in this northern country, its freedoms fractured, winter not its only crime. We took a bus from Vilnius to the castle town Trakai. How language gets trapped in the lint of memory, in the slaughter of time. The Russians had rebuilt the crumbling citadel. No history in the aligned walls, the perfect bricks. Are we like soldiers, frozen poplars in a vice? The blue metal sting of cold. I feel Russian, plunging my hands into the metal sink. Human, by which I mean ready to flee. What is it to wash dishes? Under the sink, a mouse nibbles at crumbs and runs from what it hears. Its small hands are mine, lifted claw-like and white from water. Somewhere, the mouse will find a safe place. What is longing? Warm hands softened by lamplight. And now I'm feeling like we are running out of time, and perhaps I will just read one or two animal poems from the last show. Do it, says Ariel. So I'm going to read Limpet. I want to read Limpet because I want just speak to how much Colwyn, my son, comes up in poems also about the environment, and how we have this sense that we are autonomous creatures, but we are not. We are all so very interlinked, and we as humans rely on so much that planet Earth offers us, and we are being abusive with much of it. Anyway, that's my 2 cents or so. So this poem is called Limpet. Now, if you don't live near the ocean, a limpet is a teeny tiny single-footed creature that lives inside a little pointy hat-shaped shell. Limpet. And also, I edited this poem with Patrick Lane at one of his retreats. So it's one of those last lingering poems that I worked on with him. The tide is coming in. The tide and the body hooked, a suctioning foot to a rock wall. On the convex surface of shell, time in textured rings, a few chips at the edges. Perhaps a hard fall, perhaps many falls, a whelk's drill or where the mother broke her toe. She is in threadbare jeans. Her heels walk on worn cuffs. Her son holds her leg, wants to be lifted up. What is it to be lifted up? Once he would have tucked arms to self, clamped somehow to her chest and neck. Now, muscled, he holds firm. The tide, those arms say, the tide, and his body hooked like a suctioning foot. What cannot be prized off? At the center, the inverted nipple, the apex where the one-footed animal grips. Before the tide goes out, before the solid rock dries, his legs, to hold, contract. And I'll end on a kind of slightly cheeky but quite serious poem so that you can have a few minutes for questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for chatting on the side. It's slightly distracting, but very wonderful. This poem is on page 125. Look, I've managed to do it for the last one. And just a delight. Thank you to Vicki Johnston at Caitlin Press and Malika for tonight's event, and Ariel Gordon for hosting, and John Borton for reading his wonderful, marvelous poems and for editing the book with me. And this is Barfly, after Robert Bateman's Long Light Polar Bear. Brawny one, you lean like some bloke at the bar, nose lifted to catch the scent of a bearded seal breathing a mile offshore. Maritime bear, your moans and chuffs blubber breath, padded paws hold you to ice, ice, the hard stool you balance on. Air swigger, you whiff bourbon in spilled motor oil along the Arctic shore, a sweetness you cannot resist. Styrofoam crisps, plastic Twizzlers, rust from a car battery at the local dump. This want could kill you. You short-eared giant, you hunky boar, you statue carved from melt and salt. What will you binge on when winter does not come? Light is elemental as fur, you yellowing ice flow. Sun will melt you. And that's that. Thanks. I feel like I need to just check my sugars. Hang on. Bear with me for a sec. Okay. Crap. Say that again.
Am I muted? No.
No, you're good now.
Okay. I was going to say this is the chance to ask you the questions you don't want to answer.
Or, well, it's 8:01, so really we should just let everyone go.
Okay. I think can we do one question or two questions? Two questions.
Good questions.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you about writing to or through the other poets in those sections where you were, working with the other stuff, specifically sometimes it's glossa, there was a few glossas in there, or like just after, right? So
Yeah.
Which one was the hardest to write in that way, right? When you were writing after someone, and tell me why it was hardest. Or did the ones that were very hard not make it in?
Yeah, right. I mean, the glossa was very hard. The glossa was very hard because I wanted, where is the glossa? Hang on.
It's the PK page one.
Yeah, that's right. That's the one.
I'll find it.
Somebody find it. The race is on.
I've got it. Page 41.
Thank you.
I was sent a copy of her book, but it hasn't arrived yet, which is why I couldn't hold it up, as I always like to do as a host. But I had the PDF of the book, so the reason I was able to get the page number so zippy quick was because I could just
You can look at, yeah.
I could search it.
So this one was the hardest. Partly glosas are hard. They are long poems, like you have to write 40 lines, which is quite a bit. And partly because I chose 4 lines from P.K. Page, who wrote a poem after Patrick Lane's poem. And I wanted my poem to speak to both of them. And so I think that was the tricky thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I wanted Another Summer Without You. I wanted that to be both of them in a way. So I think to speak to 2 poets who are speaking to each other.
Well, and I love that last stanza. Can you read the last stanza of that one?
Sure. P.K. Page reads Patrick's poem Albino Pheasants, and then she writes a glosa called After Reading Albino Pheasants, and then I wrote a glosa after reading Albino Pheasants. So anyway, here's the last stanza. I'll go back a few lines to the beginning of the last sentence. If I wash everything I own in mercury, would imagination preserve you? I thought we'd go down differently, you know? Thought you, the great writers, would live through everything, like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, distant drinking in some villa, survivors of influenza and each other. Where are you? Here, we've stepped too close to the wild, pressed our thumb to the scaled wing, flattened everything, swallowed the moon. And in all of it, poetry persists. Your songs run rampant in this suddenly silver world.
I think that's just so beautiful and such a poem of mourning, but also of hope and a declaration of what poetry can do or could do or should do.
Wants to do, maybe. Or it's the declaration of my what I want it to do or something. Yeah.
John has let us know that PK's poem was
Sistina. Yeah, thank you, John. Yes.
Good to know.
Good to know. Yeah.
Can I ask you about water? Because you have been focused on water for so many years, right? Between the 2 anthologies that you did with Caitlin, and then approaching the Victoria Poet Laureate position with the idea that you would try to protect the ocean or bring attention to the ocean. And so tell me about being focused on water. Has it changed how you view the landscape? Right? Because I'm kind of focused on trees and mushrooms, and that's the lens through which I see the ecosystem or the landscape. And so have you found that in your own work?
Yeah, that's interesting. I live on an island, so water is everywhere. And I live on the southern tip of it, so water is on 3 sides. I think that has certainly shaped the writer I am and the focus I have. And I think when I did Refugium, my focus wasn't on water in general. It was on the Pacific Ocean, and at the time, sea stars had started dying and melting because of acidification. And I think I just sometimes want to see something change, and it takes a long, slow process for humans to change. And then my husband and son and I drove north to Alaska and to the Yukon, and we're at the point where the water stops running to the Pacific and runs into the Arctic. And I was suddenly fascinated by the water that's feeding the oceans then, and what human impact is having on that. And I just think I'd also gone to a TED Talk here in Victoria about water. And I'd also read Dancing at the Dead Sea by Alana Mitchell. And so all those things were happening sort of close to each other and created a little bit of a fixation, perhaps, for me.
Yeah.
Especially the TED Talk, because he has a water bottle, and I'll turn the wine side away, and he pours out different amounts of water that we use water for, and all that's left for drinking is this little tiny amount at the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
it feels like that was a really good focus for you during your Victoria Poet Laureate, you know? And it's really nice to see the result of that work, at least in poetry, in this book.
Yeah, I think in the anthologies too, it's really nice to
of course.
see people across the North America thinking about water as well. And there's lots going on around poets and water and walking and reading poems along waterways, which.
Yep. All right. So this is your last chance to ask Yvonne a question, or I'm going to be forced to ask the question that's in the chat as our final question. Your final chance to say something nice to Yvonne. All right, I'm forced to ask it. Unless John has a question he'd like to
yes,
to
maybe
ask.
he does.
John, do you have a question?
I thought I was safe.
Oh no!
You know you were off the hook.
I guess maybe as a concluding question, that it's a kind of a chestnut, but what's the future plan? What's next, Yvonne?
It's a good question. I have been working on this mystery in poems forever, and the next thing is to finish it. And those poems are inspired by the Persephone myth and the crime noir genre. So that, and I'm also very interested, I think partly because of having gotten pulled into the Persephone myth and writing about women and women's experience in this big bad world. So, yeah.
So there is a future.
Well, we'll see. Hey, I mean, it is a funny thing to be experiencing the world we're experiencing right now. I think not only a pandemic, but the fires and the flooding and all of that. And then to create a tangible thing like a book I had an interesting response to this, coming out with a book that I've not had in the past, just more human debris in a way. But I believe in poetry. I believe we need to keep having the conversations that poetry ignites. So
I think of books as time capsules for the future.
Yeah.
Especially now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a lovely place to end this event.
Thank you. Thank you, Ariel and John.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Yvonne, I loved what you just said I think we need to keep having the conversation that poetry ignites is just such a wonderful phrase to keep with us as we end this event. Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you so much, Ariel. Thank you so much, John. And thanks to all of you. And finally, of course, big thanks to Munro's.
Yes.
And I will be sending out a e-newsletter after this event with a link to the replay. So if you didn't get the chance to watch all of it, or if you want to send it to a friend, you'll be able to do that. And there will also be a link to buy the book directly from Munro's. So thanks again, everybody, and I will see you in your inbox. Bye. Do you guys all want to wave together? Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Queen
For
wave.
coming.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.